Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Kasper.
Continuing to share some stories and memories of Mr. Baseball, Bob Uecker. Chris on our video stream saying, Bob Uecker and my grandfather are the reason I love the Brewers so much. Fond memories of sitting around with Grandpa listening to the game. We've got another texter here. It says, my two sons, ages 6 and 10 at the time. Yeah, you got to turn it up. I turned it down. You got her? All right. My two sons, ages 6 and 10 at the time, were fishing when the older one cast his lure about 20 feet high up in the tree. Out of the blue, my younger son, Ben, yelled, just a bit outside, in a Bob Uecker voice. We all had a good laugh. I didn't even know he knew who Bob was. Rodney says the best Brewer games were the blowouts. Uecker would always go into story time mode. Love that. His home run call is my phone ringtone during the baseball season. Surveyor says, rest in peace, Bob. Growing up listening to the games and focusing in on the stories he told while fishing with my dad or grandparents is fully engraved in my head as some of my core memories growing up. As an adult, I was able to cherish him even more and was lucky enough to have my children hear his voice on the radio. His stories made you feel like you were his friend, and he was telling you a story while he drank Miller Lights. Bob, you weren't just a broadcaster. You were a legend, a hero, and most importantly, an ambassador, not just for baseball, but for the city of Milwaukee and state of Wisconsin. Rest in peace, Bob. We will all miss your calls. Jeff saying, losing two of my favorite summer things, Bob Uecker on the radio in the shed, Lonnie's in a bottle, Lonnie's hometown bottle and a beer. I remember fishing with my dad many evenings in the summer, catching walleye and listening to Bob Uecker on the old dial tune radio while the sun was setting. And then C-Bomb, I felt sick ever since I heard about Ueck. I have listened to his voice since I was a little boy. I have heard his voice in the background almost every summer evening since I was 6 years old. I never met the man, but I felt like I knew him more than some family members. His countless stories, epic calls, get up, get out, get out of here, gone. Summers will never be the same. A lot of, you're kind of catching a theme in a lot of this. Not only was he just, on the radio call, but you're catching a theme of like hanging out with your dad or your grandpa or your family listening to Uecker. So there's a family feel to that, and definitely a family feel with Brandon. If again, check out his story at chippa.com. Brandon's mom's mom,
yes.
Right? Brandon's mom's
yes.
mom. We got to mention Brandon's mom because she's as famous as you right now too.
Oh, if not more so.
Yeah, so, as I've said many times, Brandon, you are perhaps the biggest Brewers fan I know, the smartest Brewers fan that I know, and such. So, how hard did this hit you yesterday?
It was one of those things that I think we all knew we'd have to deal with someday.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something I think we've probably all thought of, okay, well, when that day comes, and then yesterday that day came, and it just, kind of hits you just kind of in waves a little bit. Like, you see the news, I think there's just the release from the Brewers, and you're just like, oh, well. And then, kind of everything else starts pouring in. Obviously, you with so many people around, not just the game of baseball, but just kind of several different walks of life, kind of giving, their feelings about what, Uecker meant to them. And, that's almost kind of the part that, made it a little bit tougher just because you're seeing, it's obviously in that moment, what he had meant to you. But then when you kind of see and hear other people's stories, it just kind of shows how big and how important he was. Like, he's for the last 50 some years, he's been the main character of the Milwaukee Brewers.
Yeah. I've said this, I've mentioned it a few times, but you look at the state overall, we're a state that features a legendary football franchise that has so many Hall of Famers and championships. You want to go to the Bucs, you had Kareem there for a run, and you have Giannis and such, and they got a couple championships, even Brewers players or Milwaukee players. You want to throw Hank Aaron and all that. But I fully believe if you polled Wisconsin sports fans and said who's at the top of the list when you think about Wisconsin sports, I think Uecker would lead that.
I think so too.
And that is so unique because it's more for the broadcasting part of it, right? I mean, and what he brought to the game of baseball, with all these Hall of Famers and all that, it's Uecker at the top. And I think a lot of that is just because, from like a lot of people have said too, including myself, you felt like you knew him just by listening to him.
Right. Even if I think the vast majority of us never met him. I know I never did.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. Like, and you look at there were certain times in the franchise history where Uecker was the draw. Like, at times I think of once you get into the mid to later 90s into the early 2000s where, the teams weren't good, but people would, you were still paying attention, and why? You were listening to the game with Uecker.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was just, it's, as we've heard some of these stories, it's just so ingrained with so many people, and I'm no different.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're no different. Like,
right.
That's just, to me, that's just like the thing, there's many things I love about baseball, but baseball is such an everyday thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when it's baseball season, you're in it.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the grind. It's a daily thing. It's, what time do the Brewers play? Oh, it's 6:30. Okay, well, make sure we're on the radio while we're off, doing this or that. You don't necessarily have to every day have the game have your full undivided attention like you might have with other sports because there's so many games. But as you and I thought about this past day, but like, there's so many of us that you can legitimately, when you kind of sit down and think and try to crunch some of the numbers, you can think like, you've listened to this man thousands of times. Mm-hmm. When you factor in, hey, I'm going to go run to the grocery store. Well, I got the Brewer game on the radio because it's 7:30 on a Tuesday night. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, that's one time, and then you just, or you're going to work or you're going to visit family and you got the game on, and it's one of those things that I think you don't really think about just how much it's kind of just been around.
Right.
And for 50-some years, he's been that constant. I mean, the thing that was kind of, I don't think it was ever truly brought up together, but just seeing it it's crazy to think that, Bob Uecker called one of Hank Aaron's last home runs.
Yeah.
And Bob Uecker called a Jackson Chourio home run. I think
that
Kurt
gap,
Hope, the Journal Sentinel, had said that was the last home run he called, was a Jackson Chourio grand slam against the Cardinals. So
we played it earlier, yeah.
Those two are like 70 years apart in age. And think about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's wild.
It's what's the one that's going out there too? Like, he called 2.5 or 3.5% of all baseball games, and that includes before they were on broadcast.
Right.
You put it in that perspective.
Right.
Like,
and
what's that number if you just include broadcast games?
Right.
It's higher.
And you think about, obviously now, I mean, you can, pretty much every Brewer game's on TV. Mm-hmm. But if you go back for, like, there's a time where, like, that wasn't the case. Where, like, if you wanted to, it was radio.
Yeah.
And as that's changed, there's still so many people that are just, I've got to listen to it on the radio. Mm-hmm. And Bob was a big part of that. Mm-hmm. And it's just, he's always just been that constant.
Right. The other things that you kind of look back and you learn to appreciate about him, but, the fact that he was at the level he is, and, for a team, do whatever you want, call whatever game you want. You don't see it too often where the guys he has to share the booth with were like all about that too, right? Because we're in such a world, in the sports world, and that there's egos. There's like, I want the game the whole, but the fact that they had that, that relationship and that respect, over there too. Because I got to imagine when, Jeff Levering and they open up the season, knowing Uecker ain't calling a game, that's probably going to hit them really hard at that moment.
I think so, and that's part of this too. Like, it's going to be kind of in waves. Mm-hmm. Like, obviously, this past 18 hours or whatever it's been, like, it's been tough. But then it's going to probably be once you get to spring training, and even though Bob didn't really call that many spring training games the last few years, like when you get everybody, because that's something that the reporters are going to be asking about. Mm-hmm. So then that'll come out. But then opening day, like once you kind of get into the year and you realize, he's not here anymore. Like it was one thing when it was like, okay, well, the last several years it was always like, okay, well, Bob's not calling the game today, but he will be. Mm-hmm. Like you just knew, like, okay, if it's not happening right now, he's going to at some point, and now that's not going to happen, and that's going to be tough. I mean, it's going to be tough for all of us, but I mean, it's going to be tough for Jeff Levering and all those guys,
right? And it was. The one thing that the last couple of years, ever since we've, started airing Brewers games on this station too, every year, every month, every week or so, I'll come in here 4 or 5 in the morning and getting ready, and there'll already be a couple texts saying, "Hey, can you replay the Uecker call? Can you replay the Uecker call from last?" That's not going to happen anymore. And I never thought of it that way until I walked in this morning. It's something minor. It may seem minor, but it's like, well, I know I'm not going to get those texts anymore from whoever's texting in. Hey, replay that Uecker call from or I missed it or something. Can you find? But that's, when you think about, and I talked about this too, the Niger Morgan game, I was there. I didn't hear the call, but that's something I wanted to hear.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So I was going. I mean, this was 2011. It's not as instant as it is now with Twitter and all that. Yeah. So I had to go find it because you got to listen to the call.
Right.
You had to listen to that.
Right. And I mean, you even mentioned that game, and I mentioned it in my piece. Like that's one of those moments I remember exactly where it was. I was in Holcomb for a football game, and I remember usually when I get to a football game, I like to get there early, and I'm on the sidelines, I'm talking with people and stuff like that. That was a game where pretty much up to that opening kickoff, I was in my car.
Yeah.
I was listening to the game because that game went to extra innings.
Yeah.
And then I'm keeping an eye out on my phone, and at the end of the game, I think after a play, or there was a timeout or something, a couple officials came over to me. They go, "Hey, is the Brewer game over?" And I, kind of got the chance, explain to them what happened. Like, "Oh, that's awesome," and then they just go back to work. Like, that's just, Bob Uecker's a constant.
And even if he's so unique in the aspect that you might just remember a random call one day. I don't know why I remember this one, but I was going home. I was going to college, going back to college. I must have been home or something. I was driving back in my sporty red Oldsmobile Achieva that had Oldsmobile on the front window because I thought it was, it was the Fast and Furious era, so I had to try something.
Well, everyone had to know what kind of car it was.
But I remember, and I had the game on in my radio, and again, I don't know why I remember this, but, he was, and anybody who's tried to interview or talk to a kid that's not your own, sometimes it's hard to get him to talk. And I can't remember why the kid was in the booth or whatever. And to try to interview a kid's going to be tough enough to try to get something out of him. And I just remember him making kind of a comment. He's like, "You want a beer to lighten up? Your parent probably won't like that, though." It's just, that's always stuck in my mind, and that's how many years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember the first game I ever went to, it was at the Metrodome. I was in elementary school, and we got there early for BP, and we're behind the would have been the Brewers dugout. And I just remember there was a guy on the mound throwing BP to the Brewers, decked out in white pinstripe Brewers uniform. And I don't know who it was. I mean, I was younger at that time, and not like I could recognize the face, and that's who it was. It ended up being Robin Yount, which was cool when somebody said, "Oh, that was Robin Yount." And then there was a guy to my left, about 20 feet if you factor in, we're up, they're on the field in that, back to us, but like this fancy tan gray suit. And when he got done talking to whoever he was, he turned around and walked under us. It was Uecker. So it was the first time I ever got to see Uecker, but, it's like, and I know I mentioned earlier I did take a picture. The more I thought of it, because I had a camera, it's the old, film that you had to develop and take to the drugstore on Main Street to get developed. I did have pictures. I think now I did take a picture. I mean, these really cheap ones, and I don't have any more, and I wish I did. But it's like those memories stick with you.
Right.
And you don't know at that time they're going to stick with you. Right? I mean, those memories you don't know at that time, and it's like, but now you do. And, for my kid now, who's 7, he's got one of the Uecker bobbleheads that has those calls, and last summer he's in his room just playing that thing nonstop, and he memorized. Like, the Braun one against the Cubs, or the Morgan one. So, I mean, a 7-year-old has got that memorized with some of his calls over there, too. Any certain ones beside, is there, because I want people to read your article and such, too.
No,
it's but your grandma, Brandon's mom's mom, that was kind of a theme in your piece there, too. But that's, again, kind of the connection, I think, kind of circling back where everybody just felt like they knew the guy.
Right.
Like they felt like they had a relationship with him.
Right. And that's a truly unique skill to have so many people that you've never met feel like they know you. And, for him, it was, in some ways, it was the perfect storm of, he's from Wisconsin. He played for the Braves. He signed by the Braves. Like, he played for them. He ultimately, obviously, played for Philadelphia and St. Louis. Came back as a scout, which, to hear Bud Selig talk, obviously that didn't last very long. But then he makes the move. You thought he'd be a tremendous radio person. Like, it's crazy to think, like, if that doesn't happen, like, just how different is everything? It's the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Like, if Bud Selig doesn't see that and just says, "Okay, Bob, this isn't really working out," and Bob goes and does something else. there's two people I think of like in like this very special tier of like that person is just genuinely like this famous person is just genuinely entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could put them in any environment and they would thrive.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is Bob Uecker, and the other one's Bobby Heenan, who's a famous professional wrestling manager. He was just one of those guys that was just so naturally quick-witted. Like he's there's with Heenan I can just think of there's this one thing where he's talking to some fan and he's like, "So sir, I see you're married. How long have you been married?" And he's like, 20 years or 25 years. He goes, "You know that if you killed her, you'd be out by now." It's just like, and obviously I don't think about, that's not something Bob would ever say, but just like that sort of just crazy off the cuff stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, because you hear, obviously yesterday too, like Jonathan, I don't know if you saw the Jonathan Lucroy one where he shared where he went, he was a young player, had just started out and he was fishing with Bob on Bob's boat. And Lucroy was reeling in a trout or something and Bob handed him a fishing net. And the fishing net, like it slipped out of his hands, or the handle came out, or something, and it dropped in the lake. And without a beat, Uecker says, "That's my grandfather's net." To which Lucroy feels like, "Oh crap! What did I just?" It was a joke, after. But like that quick witty. And for anybody who hasn't watched his Hall of Fame speech, and I rewatched it again yesterday. I mean, it was like a stand-up act for a lot of it, but I mean, he's like. Straight faced. He's not even looking down. It's like reading off a script.
No, he had no script.
Yeah,
he just because I think even I forget who said it, but somebody brought up to him like, "You've got 10 minutes," and he goes, "I need 20."
Yeah, and he went 18. I think the video is out there for.
And you see all of these Hall of Famers, these people that like, let's be honest, they're there, but they're not excited necessarily for the speeches because they can drag on. I mean, we've seen that sometimes, but.
I think they would want Uecker to go as long as he possibly could.
He's got all these people in stitches. Like, and the line from that always gets me is when he says, that he's grateful for all this. He goes, but he really thinks he should have went in as a player.
Yeah,
like, like just setting that tone.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, and then the camera panning. You had like Kirby Puckett under how many times? Just
I think George Brett.
Yep. Raleigh Fingers, they caught him over there too. I mean, these guys behind them are just, they're dying,
right?
And that's probably one guy. If he's giving a speech, just go as long as you want,
right?
Just go as long as you want.
And for someone like that, like in some ways, it's almost a curse because there's, you almost feel like you hope he didn't felt like he always had to be on, and even if he wasn't, he was. And there's few things in life that are worse than when you can tell someone's trying to be funny, but they're just not.
Yeah.
You never, ever got that sense with him. That was because it just came natural to him.
And for a society, for the timeline that we're in, the king of self-deprecation.
Right.
And so many people are so scared to make fun, or they don't want to, or they take offense, like that.
And he was the first one. No, because I think even he had said that, his kids would ask, like, well, why do you do that? He goes, because it makes people laugh.
Mm-hmm. And it didn't bother him.
No, not at all.
It didn't bother him over there. And it was kind of it seemed more natural too. And the thing is like, we have this mindset, we got to go to school to be doing that. You got to go to school, get a degree to do a broadcaster or something like that. And it's like, well, if you have talent and you get that chance and you get a little bit of a leak, take advantage of it.
Right.
Go for it.
Even if you don't think you're ready for something, but an opportunity presents itself, go for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you're right. You're exactly like, what if?
What if?
What if you didn't get that one shot?
And you think of all those different, you mentioned the people he worked with, different people I think are going to always have that person they, think of him with. For me, like the earliest one I remember is Jim Powell. Mm. And obviously there were others before that, but, and then him and Corey Provis, I still think that might have been my favorite duo.
Corey Provis,
but obviously all those, anyone that's been so lucky to work with Euchre, but also at the same time,
it's like those guys all sounded the same too, right?
It did, yeah. But then now you look at it, and I mean, there were two things I think yesterday that really got me. Otherwise, I was, number one was when Kurt Hogue had tweeted out the picture of, initially before everyone kind of went to the Euchre statue, how it was just the Euchre statue and then something, whoever
just
it was,
one Miller Lite.
Just the one Miller Lite there. I'm like, that got me. But then the other thing was hearing Jeff Levering talk, kind of about, because obviously he knew. You know, he was one of the few people that knew.
Yep.
And then when you kind of go back and listen to his kind of sign off after the last playoff game, like it hits even harder because he knows this is it.
Yep. Yeah, that's you're right. And even like when Christian Yelich after that game,
right,
the
and
guy
then
who didn't play,
you saw some of those reactions, and I think all of us were like, "Oh, he must be retiring." Well, it was worse than that.
Yeah,
because Bob always struck me as one of those people that he'd be doing it until he wasn't here anymore.
Well, he was doing games apparently same day as doing radiation treatments.
Right.
At 90 years old.
Right, and he was there for games 1 and 2 of the wild card series, but he just wasn't feeling up for calling it. So he was there, like he was in the booth with them, but
because he did the pregame show, I think, for Game 2, and just didn't have the energy after that.
Yeah, because I think Levering had said he left in like the 7th inning because he just wasn't feeling up for it. But then after that win, he had
left a voicemail.
You're right,
him,
and I think Jeff Say goes, "That's the voicemail I'm always going to have." Or basically said, "Hey, great job. I'll see you tomorrow night."
Yeah, I mean, it's you see these things now on social media. Like I don't know if you've seen them, but I've seen videos of like, you know, you never know when it's going to be your last one. Like you never know when it's going to be the last time you leave this tree stand or go to. And it's like that's something like that,
right?
You know, you never know when it's going to be the last time you hear. At that point, you could make a call in that,
right.
And it's just, yeah. I mean, the amount of for a day and an age too, where you know we're so quick to criticize and complain. But I don't think I've ever, and I hope I never do. The one time a sports announcer, I don't think I've seen one criticism about in my entire life. There might be some Joe Blow on social media, because there's always going to be one,
right? But
it's not like Packers fans hate Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, you know, sort of thing.
Right.
And I get it. But I don't know. I don't think I've ever heard anybody complain about something.
And honestly, as you know, this has all come out, and different people obviously know Bob for different things. And being Brewers fans, obviously, we're more ingrained with the Brewer stuff. But I think sometimes the thing that has gotten lost on people, I don't think necessarily Brewers fans, but you know, maybe they know Bob from other things, was he was really good at calling games. Like obviously, you know, people like the major league stuff, or you know,
Mr. Belvedere,
whatever, the
WWE,
you know. But like when push came to shove, like he could call a heck of a game.
Yeah,
like and it's something he had said in the past too. Where like, yeah, he'll have fun if it's a 10-1 blowout. Yeah, he'll go off the beaten path. But like if it's a 4-3 game, like he's not going to be messing around. Like he's calling the game,
right?
And there's just so many small things that you're going to remember. Like there's just certain players I can just vividly recall. Like I can just pop in my head, like hearing him say their name. You know, there's
the Ryan Braun one's always going to be in my head right there.
You know, hearing the various commercials or the ad reads he would do for certain things.
Oh,
like,
yeah. I mean, those brands are now iconic because of Uecker reading them on the air.
Right.
A live read.
Right.
You know, it's definitely one of those where, you know, I know some people, you know, when a famous person, you know, moves along and you hear a lot of people say, wait, why are people so sad because you didn't know him or didn't know her or all that? This one's different because even though if you didn't know them, you still felt like you did.
You're right. And they were a part of literally your everyday life. Like, and that's, like generally celebrity deaths don't hit me very hard because I try not to, put them too much on a pedestal. This is an exception. This is the exception.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And, I know there's going to be people saying, how are the Brewers going to honor him? Should they have changed the field to him? And, there'll be a time and a place.
There's time for that. Like, you don't need, like, I'm sure that's something that the discussions have happened, but I'm sure they'll do something. But, it's just, that's not an answer we need right now.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get it at some point.
And, yeah, you kind of go back, you're right, to, even Pat Murphy in the locker room celebrations and bringing Uecker in, and you look back at these various moments, Yelich wearing Uecker cleats last year, you could sense.
Right, I think they knew.
Yeah.
Like, because, it was, the diagnosis he had was, I think he said go back to 2023. So it's something he battled for a couple of years, and based on what I've seen, it's a very aggressive type of cancer. Like,
But the fact, too, that he was still calling games and it's lung cancer.
Right.
And you couldn't tell.
Right.
Or if you thought something, you're like, oh, well, he's 90.
Yeah, that was it. Like, I mean, you just, you just chalked it up to that. I mean, and look, that's a that's a very realistic, benefit of the doubt to give somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he'd still be there doing it, and yeah, it's just what a life.
I know.
And you always hear this a lot, but there will not be another Bob Uecker. There just can't. There can't. When you look at the different things he done, the route he took, it just that's not going. That's not going to happen in this day and age anymore.
I agree. We'll start. Pat, I just walked by my wife. She was crying listening to talk about. Well, we apologize. We didn't.
That was the intention, but
apologize for that. Brandon's mom, heavy heart. Not only losing the greatest voice ever, but memories of my mom made me cry. Brandon, Carrie, and I are Brewers fans because of her. In closing, Miller Lite should bring back a couple commercials in memory of Uke. Get up, get out of here to the baseball heavens. R.I.P. John had just sent over a quote from one of Uecker's favorites jokes. Actually, I had this one set up to play, and he said this one a few times, but this was actually from his Hall of Fame speech. I've got a few here. I'm just trying to find which one it is. So instead of reading it, John, I was going to play it for you. Here you go. So this was an excerpt from his Hall of Fame speech.
But my two boys are just like me. In their championship Little League game, one of them struck out 3 times, and the other one had an error, allowed the winning run to score. They lost the championship, and I couldn't have been more proud. I remember the people as we walked through the parking lot throwing eggs and rotten stuff at our car. What a beautiful day.
And he's just like straight faced and everything on there too. So it was, I love that one.
Right there, and throughout the last day, obviously, there's just been so many different videos and stuff of great Uecker calls and stuff. And there's one that I don't remember. I didn't remember, but when I heard it, it cracked me up. And it was just something very short. It was, I think it was 2018. It was when I think it was down the stretch when Christian Yelich was on his tear, and Uecker just makes the comment. He goes, "Christian's had a great week tonight."
Yes, I saw that one too.
I don't remember. I didn't remember that, so I just cracked up when I heard that. I'm like, what a great way to say it. He's had a great week tonight.
Yeah, just so it seems so minor though, right? But then when you're like, okay, I get, you get the gist. It was, I saw that one yesterday too. I know which one you're talking about. So, but it was little stuff like that,
right? And that was it. That was part of the allure of day to day. Like when you knew you had Uecker on the calls, it could be anything. It could, and some texters have brought it up. Like it didn't have to be a playoff game. It could have, like I said in my story, it could have been a blowout in June. Heck, some of those times that was the best time to listen when the Brewers are up 10-0 or down 11-0.
Right.
Because he'd get off on some tangent, and that's going to be more entertaining than when what's ever going on in the game.
I told this a little bit earlier, but some of mine too are when I was in college, which you and I were in college same time, different schools though. But me and my roommates, it'd be spring, and we'd take turns on whose car is going to play the Brewers game while we're outside grilling and playing catch in the middle of the road. Battery might die in that person's car that day, because you're a college kid, But I remember those days to a T.
Right, and I mentioned it in my column that there's certain moments where you remember it. Like I remember the game 1 of the 2011 NLDS when they played the Diamondbacks. That was like a Saturday afternoon game, but my friends and I were at my friend's cabin, and we're just we've got a few adult beverages flowing, but we've got the Brewer game on the radio cranked up as loud as can go, and that we weren't going somewhere to watch the game. Like no, we're going to listen to this game, and just the whole time, it's just those are those moments, right. And it's not just the moments with Uecker. I think it's also your moments where you're with others, but he was a part of it.
Right.
Even though
the family.
He never knew it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he knew it, I think, in the abstract, but you think of all those times where it's some sort of get together or something, and you've just got the Brewer game on. Like that's a big part of it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if anybody hasn't seen photos too, I know you mentioned a little bit earlier, but the statue outside AFA Field is just filled up right now with items.
I don't know if I'd have time to kind of explain it now because we're getting pretty close to the top of the hour, but there was something I'd seen last year that was like, oh my, like I'd seen it in regards to that. We're like, that is just the most Wisconsin thing ever. So maybe I'll bring that up next hour once I can kind of get it in front of me instead
Perfect,
of trying to, instead of getting cut off here.
We got 30 seconds left, but our good buddy Richie, I was kind of waiting for Richie to text in here too. I'll never look at my canned vegetable garden the same way ever again. Thanks for the memories, Bob. So that's a good one there too, Richie. So, but yeah, a lot of good ones there. If you have any more, even if it's a specific call or your favorite, how about this too? Your favorite line or your favorite quote.
Yeah.
It could be movie, could be commercial, could be from a game or whatever. Anything. Let us know. And
there's a line for Major. I think it's actually for Major League 2 that I can't say on air, but I will reference it often.
Yeah.
It's two simple words.
I think I know which one you're talking about too.
I will just something happens, I'll just deadpanly say, I'll be like.
Although I will say, underrated performance in Major League 3 by Bob Uecker.
Yeah, but back to the minors.
Yep.
Yes.
With the back and forth with the other play-by-play caller over there too. So.